I've learned that the fastest way to expose fake authority is to let it introduce itself. The first sound I heard that Tuesday morning wasn't birds or the wind moving through the oak trees. It was the slow crunch of SUV tires climbing my private gravel driveway, a sound that immediately felt wrong because nobody came up that road without my permission. I set my coffee mug on the porch railing and watched two white SUVs roll toward my gate, each wearing magnetic signs that read HOA Compliance Division in bold blue letters. For people stepped out wearing matching polos, clipboards tucked under their arms like badges of honor. Behind them, standing with both hands confidently on her hips, was Victoria Hayes, the HOA president who had spent the last 6 weeks insisting she controlled property she'd never legally touched. The morning air smelled like fresh-cut cedar from the fence I had finished staining the weekend before, and the only other sound was the metallic rattle of the chain wrapped around my steel entrance gate. Victoria smiled the way real estate agents smile before delivering bad news. "Mr. Carter," she called, "we're here for a mandatory compliance inspection." I didn't move. I simply rested one hand on the gate latch and looked at the 4 strangers behind her. None of them carried county credentials. None displayed law enforcement identification. Just matching shirts, clipboards, and the kind of confidence that only comes from believing nobody will question you. "You don't have permission to enter," I said calmly. One of the men scribbled something on his clipboard before looking up. "Refusing an inspection is another violation." I almost laughed. Another violation. That implied the first ones meant something. Victoria took 2 deliberate steps closer until expensive perfume replaced the smell of pine drifting from my property. "Every homeowner in Willow Creek Estates is required to cooperate," she said. "If necessary, we'll document your refusal and proceed with enforcement." I looked past them toward the neighborhood entrance, almost half a mile away. That decorative stone sign with the HOA logo had fooled plenty of people into believing every acre beyond it belonged to the association. Even some delivery drivers assumed my ranch was inside their jurisdiction. The previous owner had warned me about that on closing day. He slid the original deed across the table, smiled, and said, "One day they'll knock on your gate. Don't argue. Just let them keep talking." At the time I thought he was joking. Standing there now, I realized he had been preparing me for this exact morning. Victoria pointed toward my driveway camera mounted beneath the porch roof. "Go ahead and record everything," she said with a smug grin. "It'll only prove we followed procedure." I nodded once. That's exactly why the cameras are running. Her smile grew even wider. She thought I was bluffing. She thought this was another homeowner who would eventually get tired of the letters, the warnings, the threats, and simply give in. What she didn't understand was that every notice she'd mailed, every so-called violation she'd posted, every confident statement she'd made about owning authority over my land had been carefully documented from day one. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and locked the gate one final time before looking directly at her. "You're welcome to stand right where you are," I said. "Because the moment you step past this gate, you'll be standing on property your HOA has absolutely no authority over." Victoria kept smiling at the gate, but my mind had already drifted back almost 2 years to the afternoon I first drove onto this property. The tires of my old pickup crunched over the same gravel road, the suspension rocking gently as rows of mature oak trees opened into a quiet stretch of pasture that immediately felt different from every subdivision I had visited. After 15 years designing roads, drainage systems, and commercial developments across Texas, I had grown tired of neighborhoods where every mailbox matched and every decision required someone else's approval. I wanted space, silence, and ownership that actually meant something. The ranch was just over 11 acres, with an aging cedar barn, a modest ranch house, and a steel entrance gate that had clearly survived decades of weather without caring what anyone thought about its appearance. The place was not perfect. The porch needed repairs. Several fence posts leaned a few inches off-center. The grass reached almost to my boots in some areas. To me, it looked exactly like freedom. The seller, an older rancher named Harold Bennett, shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that came from 60 years of honest work. Before we even walked inside the house, he pointed toward the subdivision less than half a mile away where identical rooftops stretched across the horizon like neatly arranged dominoes. He smiled, almost amused. "They are going to tell you this place belongs to them someday," he said. I laughed because I assumed he was exaggerating. He did not laugh back. Instead, he reached into the glove compartment of his truck and pulled out a thick envelope filled with surveys, county plats, recorded deeds, and title documents. The paper smelled faintly of dust and old filing cabinets, the kind of scent you only find in county record offices. Harold tapped one page with his weathered finger. Read every line before you sign anything. This parcel was intentionally left outside the subdivision back in 1998. Different deed, different restrictions. No homeowners association. I spent nearly 3 hours with the title company reviewing every page. The attorney explained that while my driveway connected to the same county road as the subdivision entrance, my land had never been annexed into the association. The boundaries had been surveyed multiple times over the years, and every transfer of ownership repeated the same language. Private property, independent parcel, no mandatory association membership. Hearing those words felt better than any sales pitch a realtor could have delivered. I signed the closing documents without hesitation. Over the next several months, I repaired the porch, replaced sections of old fencing, installed security cameras near the gate, and mounted a simple black sign that read private property in white block letters. Nothing flashy, just clear enough that nobody could honestly misunderstand it. Most of my neighbors waved when they drove past. A few stopped to introduce themselves. They were friendly enough, though almost every conversation ended with the same puzzled question. Which section of the association are you in? I would politely answer, actually, I am not part of the association. Most people simply nodded and moved on. One person, however, looked at me as though I had challenged the laws of nature itself. Her name was Victoria Hayes. Victoria Hayes had the remarkable ability to make every conversation sound like a board meeting. The first time she introduced herself, she never asked how long I had lived there or whether I needed anything from the neighborhood. Instead, her eyes drifted past me, studying my barn, my pickup truck, and the stack of cedar posts waiting beside the fence line. She smiled politely, but it was the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Welcome to Willow Creek Estates," she said. "We work very hard to protect property values around here." I thanked her and explained that I appreciated the welcome, but I was not actually part of the subdivision. Her expression froze for just a fraction of a second before returning to its carefully practiced confidence. "Everyone on this road falls under the association," she replied. "You probably have not received your paperwork yet." I simply wished her a good afternoon and walked back toward my workshop. I figured the misunderstanding would disappear once she checked the county records. Instead, it became the beginning of something much larger. 3 days later, an envelope appeared inside my mailbox. The paper was thick, printed on expensive letterhead with the association logo stamped across the top. It congratulated me on becoming a member of the community before listing annual dues, architectural guidelines, landscaping requirements, and inspection procedures. At the bottom was a payment deadline highlighted in bright red ink. I read every page twice before placing it neatly into a file cabinet beside my desk. I did not throw it away because engineers learn early that documentation often becomes more valuable than arguments. The following week, another letter arrived. This one informed me that my barn required exterior paint matching. Approved community colors. A few days after that came a notice claiming my fence exceeded approved height restrictions. Then another questioned my utility trailer parked beside the workshop. Each envelope carried a different violation number, each one more confident than the last. I responded exactly once with a short certified letter. I thanked the association for reaching out, enclosed a copy of the recorded parcel identification page from my closing documents, and respectfully explained that my property was not subject to their governing documents. The letter was polite, factual, and impossible to misunderstand. 2 weeks later, Victoria knocked on my front door carrying the very same certified letter in one hand. "There has been some confusion," she said. "These records are probably outdated." I almost smiled. County property records do not become outdated because someone dislikes what they say. I invited her to look at the parcel map I kept framed inside my office. She barely glanced at it before waving dismissively. "Our attorney will sort this out," she replied. After that conversation, the notices became more frequent instead of stopping. They arrived almost every Friday afternoon as predictably as the mail truck itself. Sometimes I could smell fresh printer ink before I even opened the envelope. One notice demanded I remove my security cameras because they allegedly faced common areas. Another insisted that my steel entrance gate violated neighborhood design standards. My favorite claimed my American flag pole exceeded approved community height. Every document went into the same filing cabinet, organized by date inside labeled folders. I never argued. I never raised my voice. Every evening, I updated a spreadsheet recording the notice number, delivery date, claimed violation, and supporting photographs from my own property. Victoria believed she was building a case against me. She never realized she was quietly building one against herself. By early spring, the letters stopped pretending to be reminders and started reading like commands. The language changed from friendly requests to official-sounding demands filled with bold text, deadlines, and references to rules that had absolutely nothing to do with my property. One notice claimed that failure to cooperate would result in escalating enforcement actions. Another informed me that a compliance team would soon conduct an exterior inspection, whether I was available or not. The wording was almost impressive. Whoever drafted those documents understood how to make ordinary paper sound intimidating. Unfortunately for them, I also understood something they clearly did not. Authority does not come from confident language. It comes from lawful jurisdiction. Every Saturday morning, I walked my fence line with a cup of black coffee, listening to meadowlarks and the steady breeze moving through the tall grass. It became almost relaxing until I noticed unfamiliar tire tracks appearing near my entrance. A few days later, my security cameras captured two people wearing association polo shirts standing outside my gate, pointing toward my workshop while taking photographs from the county road. They never crossed the property line, but they stayed long enough to create a folder of pictures that would later appear attached to another violation notice. According to the letter, my storage building created visual inconsistency within the community. I remember shaking my head and smiling because the building they criticized had been standing there for nearly 20 years before their subdivision even broke ground. The following week, things escalated again. I came home from a project site just before sunset, the smell of warm asphalt still clinging to my work boots, and found bright orange survey flags planted several feet outside my entrance. Someone had tied a small laminated tag to one of the stakes that read Future Community Landscape Improvement. I pulled out my phone, photographed every flag from multiple angles, recorded the location using the built-in mapping application, and carefully removed nothing. Experience had taught me that untouched evidence speaks louder than emotional reactions. The next morning, another envelope arrived explaining that decorative stone columns would eventually enhance the entrance corridor for all association members. I was apparently expected to contribute financially to improvements built on land I did not even belong to. Around the same time, neighbors began stopping me with increasingly awkward questions. One gentleman asked whether I had finally decided to join the association. Another apologized because he had heard I was refusing mandatory inspections. Rumors spread faster than facts. Victoria had become very good at telling people only enough to make herself sound reasonable. She never mentioned the county records. She never mentioned my certified responses. She simply repeated that every property on this road followed the same rules. Eventually, I noticed association vehicles slowing down almost every afternoon as they passed my entrance. Sometimes someone would write notes on a clipboard while another person pointed toward my gate or cameras. It almost felt like they were waiting for me to lose my patience. Instead, I kept adding photographs, timestamps, certified mail receipts, and video clips into neatly organized folders. My filing cabinet was becoming heavier every month. Then one Thursday afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found the document that finally revealed Victoria's real plan. Printed across the top in large capital letters were the words "Notice of Mandatory Property Compliance Inspection." According to the schedule, representatives would arrive the following Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock to enter my land. Reading that sentence, I did not feel nervous. I quietly looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall, circled the date with a blue marker, and realized they had just made the mistake I had been patiently waiting for. The weekend before the scheduled inspection passed with almost unsettling calm. I mowed the grass around the house, repaired a loose hinge on the barn door, and pressure washed the front porch while the scent of wet cedar drifted through the warm afternoon air. Anyone driving past would have assumed nothing unusual was about to happen. That was exactly how I wanted it. I resisted every temptation to call Victoria, argue with the association, or send another certified letter. They already had every document they needed to realize they were wrong. The fact that they continued moving forward told me this was no longer about correcting a misunderstanding. It had become about proving they could not be challenged. Monday morning, I stopped by the county offices on my way home from a construction site. I did not ask anyone to intervene or file a complaint. Instead, I quietly confirmed that every parcel record, survey reference, and deed description matched the copies already sitting inside my filing cabinet. The clerk smiled politely after looking through the database. "Everything appears exactly as recorded," she said. "Your parcel has not changed." That simple sentence gave me more confidence than any dramatic confrontation ever could. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down and let the warm Texas air fill the truck. Gravel crunched beneath my tires as I turned through my gate, and the security cameras automatically followed the movement, recording another ordinary evening. I tested every camera angle one more time, checked that the timestamps were synchronized, and replaced the memory cards with fresh ones. Then I walked the property line carrying a small notebook, recording the condition of every fence section, gate latch, survey marker, and entrance sign. Years of engineering had taught me that careful preparation almost always defeated loud assumptions. Before sunset, I received one final envelope from the association. This one declared that refusal to cooperate during the inspection could result in legal action and additional financial penalties. The language sounded stronger than ever, but something about it felt rushed. The formatting was inconsistent, and one page even referenced community bylaws that applied only to interior subdivision lots. I filed it beside the others without writing a response. That evening, I called the non-emergency number for the county sheriff's office. I explained that representatives from a private homeowners association planned to arrive at my property the following morning, claiming authority over land that county records clearly showed was outside their jurisdiction. The dispatcher listened carefully and explained that property disputes were generally civil matters, unless a criminal issue developed. It was exactly the answer I expected. I thanked her for the information, noted the time of the call in my notebook, and wished her a pleasant evening. There was no frustration because I had never expected someone else to solve the situation for me. Around dusk, I stood on the porch holding a glass of iced tea while the last sunlight reflected off the black paint of the entrance gate. The simple white letters reading private property looked almost brighter than usual. Every detail that had seemed ordinary for months suddenly felt important. The cameras, the gate, the signs, the folders inside my office. Even the gravel driveway that forced every visitor to approach slowly enough for multiple cameras to capture their arrival. I slept better that night than I had in weeks because I finally understood what Victoria did not. She believed Tuesday morning would prove I had no choice except to obey. I knew Tuesday morning would simply create the evidence that would prove exactly who had been ignoring the law all along. Tuesday arrived with a cloudless sky and the kind of cool morning that disappears before noon. I woke before my alarm, brewed a pot of black coffee, and walked onto the porch just as the first sunlight reached the top of the oak trees lining my driveway. Everything looked exactly the way it had the day before. The steel gate reflected a faint orange glow. The white private property sign stood perfectly straight beside the entrance. My security cameras quietly followed the occasional movement of birds crossing the yard. There was something strangely comforting about how ordinary everything appeared, because I knew the next few hours would probably become the most carefully documented moments since I bought the ranch. Before 8 o'clock, I carried a thick accordion folder from my office to the kitchen table. Inside were certified mail receipts, dated photographs, copies of every notice the association had ever mailed, county parcel maps, recorded deeds, title insurance documents, tax records, survey reports, and several handwritten notes from my closing appointment nearly 2 years earlier. Most people would have considered the collection excessive. Engineers call it preparation. I opened the folder one last time and stopped at a yellow sticky note attached to the original survey. It contained only one sentence written by the attorney who handled my closing. Never rely on assumptions when the recorded documents already answer the question. I smiled because that sentence explained the entire situation better than anything else. Victoria had built her position entirely on assumptions. I had built mine on recorded facts. Around 8:30, my cell phone rang. The caller identification displayed an unfamiliar local number. It was the title attorney who had represented me during the purchase. I had left him a voicemail the previous afternoon, simply asking him to confirm that nothing had changed in the public record since closing. He told me he had personally reviewed the filings before returning my call. Every recorded document remained exactly the same. Then he added one detail I had almost forgotten. The parcel containing my ranch had originally been offered inclusion when the subdivision expanded years earlier. The owners at the time formally declined, and that decision had been permanently recorded with the county. It is not ambiguous, he said calmly. There is a documented history explaining why your property was intentionally excluded. Hearing those words felt like discovering the final piece of a puzzle I had already completed. After ending the call, I slipped my phone into my pocket and highlighted that note inside my folder. At exactly 8:57, I heard distant engines approaching from the county road. Through the trees, I watched two white sport utility vehicles slow as they reached my driveway before turning onto the gravel. The familiar sound echoed across the pasture while tiny clouds of dust drifted behind them in the still morning air. My cameras silently tracked every movement exactly as they had been programmed to do. I picked up the accordion folder, locked my front door behind me, and walked toward the entrance at an unhurried pace. Victoria believed she was arriving to enforce rules. I knew she was about to create the very evidence that would finally expose how completely she had misunderstood the limits of her own authority. Victoria stepped out of the lead sport utility vehicle with the same confident expression she had worn every other time she visited my property, except this morning she had brought an audience. The four people behind her carried clipboards, measuring wheels, cameras, and neatly printed inspection forms. They walked with the certainty of people who had repeated the same routine dozens of times before. The gravel shifted beneath their shoes as they approached the gate, and every movement was quietly captured by the cameras mounted beneath the porch roof and along the fence line. I stood on my side of the closed gate, holding nothing more than the accordion folder under one arm. Victoria glanced at it for only a second before dismissing it with a small smile. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said. "We are here to complete the mandatory compliance inspection outlined in our notice." Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed. I nodded politely. "Good morning. As I explained before, you do not have permission to enter this property." One of the inspectors immediately wrote something on his form. Another raised a camera and photographed the entrance sign. Victoria folded her hands together. "Your refusal will be documented." "Please do," I answered. "Make sure the date and time are accurate." She seemed surprised by how cooperative I sounded. I was not cooperating with her inspection. I was cooperating with the creation of an accurate record. One of the men stepped closer to the gate and peered through the bars toward my workshop. Another pointed toward the barn while quietly discussing roof color and exterior maintenance standards that had never applied to my land. I listened without interrupting. Every incorrect statement added another layer to the record. Victoria eventually held up a packet of papers. "We have authority under the community governing documents." I simply asked one question. "Can you identify the recorded document that places this parcel inside your association?" There was a brief silence. She answered without looking at any paperwork. "This entire corridor is governed by the association." It was not the answer to the question I had asked, and she knew it. I looked directly at the camera mounted above the gate before returning my attention to her. "So you cannot identify a recorded document." She shifted the conversation immediately. "You are obstructing an official inspection." Again, I did not argue. "Please include that statement in your report exactly as you said it." Behind her, one of the inspectors quietly asked whether they should begin measuring from the entrance. Victoria nodded without hesitation. That single exchange told me everything I needed to know. No one had verified the property records before arriving. They had accepted assumptions as facts. I checked the time on my watch. 9:12 in the morning, exactly according to the schedule printed in their notice. My phone vibrated inside my pocket with a calendar reminder I had set days earlier. It displayed only 3 words. Let them speak. I slipped the phone away without reading anything else. The breeze carried the smell of freshly cut grass across the driveway, while the steel gate remained firmly closed between us. Victoria believed the conversation had reached a stalemate. In reality, every confident statement she had made since stepping out of her vehicle had quietly moved the situation toward a conclusion she had never imagined, because the one document she had never bothered to verify was the only one that actually mattered. Victoria looked toward her inspection team as if expecting someone to support her claim with a document, but no one moved. The only sounds were the gentle breeze brushing through the oak branches and the occasional click from a camera shutter. I slowly placed the accordion folder on the flat wooden railing beside the gate and unfastened the clasp. Every paper inside had been organized weeks earlier, each section separated by colored tabs that marked deeds, surveys, correspondence, tax records, and county filings. I did not rush. Confidence rarely needs to hurry. Victoria folded her arms. "You can show us whatever personal paperwork you want," she said. "It does not change the authority of the association." I looked at her calmly, before removing a certified copy of the recorded plat map. "Actually," I replied, "this is the only document that determines whether your association has authority here." I held the map where everyone could see it without opening the gate. Thick black boundary lines outlined the subdivision. My parcel appeared immediately beside it, separated by a bold notation identifying it as an independent tract. A highlighted reference pointed directly to the county recording number. One of the inspectors leaned closer, studying the page more carefully than anyone else had so far. I handed him a second document showing the legal description recorded with the deed. He read silently for several moments before glancing toward Victoria. "This parcel number is different," he said quietly. Victoria dismissed the observation with a wave of her hand. "There are always technical differences." I reached into the folder again and removed another certified document. This one contained the recorded amendment filed years before the subdivision expansion. The final paragraph stated that the ranch property had been offered inclusion, formally declined, and permanently excluded from all homeowners association covenants. The county recording stamp covered the bottom corner with a date that predated the construction of most homes surrounding us. For the first time that morning, Victoria stopped speaking. The inspector continued reading until he reached the final page. "This says the tract is specifically excluded," he admitted. Another member of the inspection team stepped forward to compare the legal parcel number against the notice they had brought with them. The numbers did not match. They never had. I quietly placed copies of every certified letter I had mailed over the previous weeks beside the recorded documents. Each one explained exactly the same thing and included copies of the same county records they were now seeing for the first time. The realization spread across their faces one expression at a time. They had received the evidence months earlier but had never verified it. Instead, they continued issuing notices based entirely on assumption. Victoria finally broke the silence. "There must be some mistake." I gently shook my head. "That is exactly what I hoped you would discover before scheduling today's inspection." No one reached for the gate anymore. No one mentioned measuring fences or inspecting buildings. The clipboards remained at their sides while the morning breeze lifted the edges of the paperwork resting on the railing. Everything that had seemed uncertain only minutes earlier now rested on recorded facts that could be verified by anyone willing to read them. The authority Victoria believed she possessed had disappeared without an argument, without raised voices, and without a single step beyond the closed gate, leaving only the quiet weight of official records speaking for themselves. The inspection team stood in complete silence for several long seconds before the man holding the legal description carefully closed his clipboard. He looked at Victoria, then back at the certified county documents resting on the railing, and finally let out a slow breath that sounded less like frustration and more like realization. "These recording numbers match the county filings," he said quietly. "This parcel is outside the association." Nobody argued with him. There was nothing left to argue about because the answer had been sitting in public records for years. Victoria reached for one of the documents as though reading it again might somehow change the words printed across the page. It did not. She lowered the paper without saying anything. The confidence she had carried up my driveway had quietly disappeared, replaced by the unmistakable expression of someone discovering that certainty and accuracy are not always the same thing. I gathered the documents back into the accordion folder one section at a time, making sure every certified copy returned to its proper place. The cameras continued recording every movement, just as they had since the vehicles first entered my driveway. One of the inspectors apologized for the misunderstanding before explaining that he would recommend the inspection report be closed immediately. Another asked whether he could photograph the recorded plat for his file. I handed him a copy without hesitation. Facts become much more useful when everyone has access to them. Victoria finally spoke, but her voice was noticeably softer than it had been only a few minutes earlier. She admitted that the association would need to review its records and verify how my address had been included in their enforcement database. I simply nodded. I had wondered the same thing for weeks. As the inspection team returned to their vehicles, the gravel driveway echoed once again beneath their footsteps, but this time no one carried measuring wheels toward my fence or pointed cameras at my barn. They left with copies of county records instead of violation notes. Within the following month, every notice, assessment, and inspection demand previously mailed to my address was formally withdrawn. A written confirmation arrived stating that my property was not subject to the governing documents of the association. Shortly afterward, I learned from several neighbors that the board had begun reviewing other parcel records after discovering additional mapping errors involving properties near the subdivision boundary. Apparently, my situation had prompted a much broader examination than anyone expected. Life on the ranch quickly returned to the quiet rhythm that had convinced me to buy the place in the first place. The mornings once again began with birdsong instead of certified envelopes. The smell of fresh cedar replaced the scent of printer ink from unnecessary notices. My security cameras continued recording the entrance, although now they mostly captured delivery trucks, passing deer, and the occasional neighbor stopping to wave. A few weeks later, I mounted one additional sign beneath the original private property marker. It was simple, made from black steel with clean white lettering, and visible from the county road without being flashy. It read, "Not part of any homeowners association." Every time I drove through the gate, I remembered something Harold Bennett had told me on the day I bought the ranch. Do not argue. Let the records speak. He had been right all along, because real ownership was never decided by the loudest voice standing at the gate. It was decided years earlier by the documents, quietly waiting inside the county courthouse for anyone willing to read them.